All right. Season 3. Season 2, I mean. With Jarnell Tucker from Chef Suites. I'm Kenny with Carter from Permitive. We are working to try to make engineering accessible to the small project market. We've worked with Jarnell before. Check out our website. We got a pricing tool. You can get a price online in seconds. And today we're here to talk about some complicated engineering challenges that I'm sure you've seen. We're here at Chef Suites, Richmond, where tell us a little bit about the concept.
Sure. Here at Chef Suite, what we try to create is a open and inviting place for chef tenants, as we call them, entrepreneurs, to come in and start their business as quick as possible at a low price point. So we're offering flexible lease terms, a private kitchen space, really where they can operate efficiently and optimally on the delivery-only apps. So we built out at Richmond 16 200 square foot kitchens. Some can be expanded into 400 square foot if you have a larger operation. And like I said, our goal is to provide a lot of resources and back-end support. So our chef tenants can come in and do what they do best, right? They can come in, cook food, and put it out as quickly as possible and not have to worry about a lot of the back-end stuff, the delivery apps, the promotions, everything it takes to really launch them into success. We want to help out as much as we can.
And the entire brick and mortar build out process, which is, I think, probably an easy thing to underestimate.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We've seen it.
I mean, we've seen so many conversations with prospective tenants coming in where obviously as a restaurateur or even a cook, a line cook, your dream is to own your own restaurant. And their first thing is comparing it to brick and mortar. And it's just a completely different business model. So, that education process of explaining to them, this is your business and this is your restaurant. We want you to feel that way here, but it is a different type of business.
You mentioned right before we started a cool 71 degrees, which is something you're able to achieve here because of the systems equipment that you've invested in. And we talk about all the time. But one of my phrases is you can be as comfortable as you can afford.
Yes, absolutely.
Especially with all that ventilation equipment.
God bless the DOAS system and Captive Air. Sure, small plug for my guys, Jacob and Jacob.
Yeah.
But
I've been talking about them too a lot. I swear, everybody, we aren't endorsed by Captive Air, but they are great. They do a great job.
They put out a really good product, a lot of support. At the end of the day, like you mentioned, Kenny, it's a lot of money that goes into not just restaurant build up, but making it comfortable. And that's something that's really lacking in the back of the house in a lot of restaurants. That's where you pinch pennies as much as you can because of the cost. And at the end of the day, we want our tenants, we want our chefs in here to feel comfortable because it is a small space, it is tight, and you're doing high volume. So we don't want it to be 95 degrees in the kitchen at all times. So that's, one of the main benefits we provide here at Chef Suite is having a comfortable kitchen.
Because it's not just the fact that you have a lot of tons, it's also the kind of tonnage of a DOAS is twice expensive, and a lot of people, what we see is chefs will come in and have their dream restaurant. They maybe have some funding. And so it's their dream restaurant. In my mind, it's kind of like putting a dream house together, but theirs is what goes under that hood.
Right.
It's like, I'm doing my restaurant. I have everything I want under the hood. Right. And then it gets longer and longer and longer, which means more and more and more tonnage.
Right.
So I usually start when I'm consulting like a single person brick and mortar, not a multi-tenant suite, to say, we'll start with making that hood smaller, and it'll probably be more likely you'll be able to achieve comfort, or don't make comfort a constraint, or have a really deep checkbook where you're willing to pay for all that tonnage.
Right. There's always going to be a trade-off. Right. You're never going to get everything you want unless you have unlimited funding and, you don't really care if you fail or not. Yeah. But I think you mentioned it on one of your other episodes where, your success is directly tied to the length of your hood, right? Yeah. And I thought that was such a funny and, great way to put it, because at the end of the day, your example at Chipotle was perfect. They got a 6-8 foot hood and they're pumping out millions of dollars from one location every year. Why can't anyone else do that? Why do you think you need a unlimited amount of space in order to achieve what you want?
Yeah. Just get creative with the business. Like all of us business owners, you have to get creative at some point. Constraints are going to be there. Yeah. So we've learned that the sooner we can identify that with the chef, the better, and we've learned the hard way. They've learned the hard way by finding out later. We've learned to try to inform them sooner, but the engineers usually are going through the architects, and then we don't really even talk to that side of things. And then we just react. Well, we'll design it. You ask for this, we give you that. And then they see the numbers like, what? That's not the 5-ton air handler I thought I could put in there from my house. Yeah. Then we get over engineering all the time. But and then even so, even the issues, even with a nice system, just the tuning and the commissioning process of getting the set points right, getting it to behave.
Absolutely. I mean, we spent at least our first 6 months in operation fine tuning the captive air system. And it's not a fault of captive air or the engineers, you guys, the design. At the end of the day, it's just there are unforeseen conditions that pop up, and you don't know how a system is going to react with, 730-ton DOAS units operating at the same time. Yeah. So it is a lot of trial and error, but once you get it right, and it's phenomenal. I mean, you could ask any one of our tenants how they feel under the hood. I'm sure they have plenty of issues all day long, as any operator does, but they do not feel warm in their kitchen.
Especially because my wife's a chef, so they're used to the temperatures in the kitchens just being unbearably hot. Especially here, it's the hot summer heat, sweaty air, and you didn't do it, but there's another project in a muggy part of the country that we worked on with y'all. Didn't go. But but that type of air is tough to deal with, even worse.
And when we were talking about that location, that was one of the biggest things that we were considering, is just that humidity down south is so different.
Yeah.
And how to tackle that.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. So when was this your first location, or did you do another one before?
This was our first location.
Okay.
Yeah, so we launched the business in January of 2021, set our sights on a number of different secondary markets. That's been our goal. Our goal from the beginning was to tackle somewhere we could get in at a lower real estate price point, for one, but really where suburban sprawl was going. We saw everybody going out to the smaller cities or even the suburbs of the largest cities, and that's where we wanted to focus: high growth, high income markets. So Richmond was one of a handful of cities that we were targeting. We ended up buying here first, and we hit the ground running. You guys have talked a lot in the past about just the local nature of Richmond, right? Yeah. And that was so key here, and it's something I take with us every location that we look at thereafter. Our entry into Richmond, I contacted Amrit at Fulton Singh Architects. He's an old-time friend of mine, and really the only Richmond player I knew at the time. So I reached out to him and talked about our concept. He ended up signing on as being our architect. He introduced us to you guys, to Urban Core, phenomenal GC, all of our partners.
Shout out Urban Core.
Yeah, I could go on and on the list of partners that we have in Richmond. But it was so important, because as an owner, I think the biggest thing that you can do right is knowing what you don't know. And if you go in saying, I know everything and I'm going to tell everybody how to do their job, you're going to fail very quickly. Or you're going to just spend a ton of money that you didn't need to.
Well, one thing I know that went really well with you is, that trust. You had a lot of trust in the design team and the construction team all the way through, which is so important. We've had clients with varying levels of trust or involvement, and we'll make an engineering judgment or decision about equipment like a DOAS, and it's just like, I don't know, that's over engineering. And then invariably, we're kind of pushed to lighten the spec, and then it's our faults that it's not comfortable. It's like, so I've been really a lot more aggressive on pushing back on that for folks. Like, look, you really just can't get something for nothing.
Yeah. No, and I think it's important to understand that, right? As owners, we need to ask the tough questions, and for one, not take everybody at face value. If an engineer says, "Oh, we can't do it," well, I want to know if you've explored other solutions, and I want to know how we can find a way to do it, even if that's the most expensive option. We'll say no to it if we need to, or if we need to, trim back the specs to save money. I'll take that on the chin if that doesn't work out the way I want to, because at the end of the day, that was my choice. Yeah. But we have to ask the right questions in order to get the answers, and then make the decision from there. And then that kind of reduces the blame game, right? Because if you're expecting everyone to take accountability and you're not going to take it yourself, well, everybody's going to be pointing fingers all the time.
That's the worst part about the industry. That's really the biggest motivation for this podcast, is to try to build some trust in what's notoriously just a shit show of finger pointing, and nobody's working together. And it's just, I mean, even, you and I've had a little bit of a tough thing, because it's such a stressful industry. So things get to the head. We've been working this year a lot on just, I don't know, centering ourselves, doing better with like tempering ourselves, I guess. Assuming no malice is one motif that we've been trying to, go with. If it seems confrontational, just to try to assume that we just maybe misread a signal.
Right.
And if it's hard though.
Yeah.
I think everybody in the industry, it's somewhat of the culture, right? Whether like most of my history is in real estate.
Yeah.
Before this project, I was tangentially involved in construction.
Commercial real estate or
multifamily and commercial.
Gotcha.
So this was my first foray into direct construction management. And the industry itself has this culture of just backpedaling. It's cheaper to make the mistake. It's cheaper to ask forgiveness than ask permission. Right. And everybody operates accordingly, that mistakes will happen. We'll fix them in the field. And they're used to backpedaling as opposed to talking about the hard issues up front, confronting them head on, planning for it, and coordinating the way you need to in order to make sure the least amount of unforeseen conditions come up.
Yeah, the least amount being critical. We follow like a 70% rule. If we have about 70% of our information, we'll go with it and inform somebody like, look, we could wait for another 3 months for 100% of the data, or we're going to approach it like this, which means, it could go a little bit wrong, but it's easier to course correct and we don't get the project moving forward.
Right. And I mean, the other option is you spend a lot of money, right? You do, VDC, you do 3D renderings, you understand your building stack up front, you spend that 35, 50, 100 grand, depending on the size of the project. And then maybe you avoid some of those issues, right? But you're still going to have to build, as an owner, still going to build in the same amount of contingency, 5, 10%, whatever you need. And you're still going to eat through that. So on the owner side, it's like, do I want to spend that money up front? It's the same methodology. I'll save 50 grand up front. I might have 20 grand of issues down the road, but I'd rather save that 50 grand up front. And I don't necessarily agree with it, but that's just the way it's worked for so long that, you kind of have to fit into that box, right?
I think if engineers understood that concept of contingency more, then they would probably be better consultants. Can you walk us through that for the folks listening? You've been in the multifam market and this commercial kitchen market. So can you walk us through what that means to you and maybe the differences between those markets and how you plan contingency? Yeah.
So on the multifamily side, it's a lot more simpler. And I say that very broadly, but depending on the project, it's generally simpler, right? It's an industry that's been around for so long. There are certain checks and balances and there's certain just procedures that it's fairly easy to make, predictive decisions and make assumptions. So you can have a 5-6% contingency in a normal market and feel generally comfortable because your GC has made tens of thousands of units before, right? So they understand exactly what issues are going to come up, or they've worked in the given market. So they understand the utilities issues that are going to come up, or if there's wastewater, anything like that, right? Whereas on our side, building commercial kitchens, building ghost kitchens, it's basically never been done before, right? It's not to say that we're the first to do it, but we jumped in right when they were starting. So everybody's doing it for the first time as owners, as GCs, as engineers, so our contingency, we started with 10%, which, knock on wood and God bless Urban Core as well. We all stayed within budget, generally within timeline outside of a sinkhole that we can talk about that story at some point.
Sinkhole, oh my God.
But overall, we stayed within that, and that contingency, it really just moves up and down based on, the risks associated with the project.
Yeah. And so you're mentioning there was basically no historical data to predict from because this was the first time everybody was doing this. The idea, I think, of this came from COVID and just like, well, if I guess we're going to deliver everything, put it a little centralize a lot of kitchens and distribute, right? So then, there's no historical data. We know what restaurants kind of do, but we don't know how many hoods are here?
We have 16 hoods.
16 hoods.
16 panels. I mean, that was something we talked about earlier. How do you figure out like branch circuit distribution or water or gas or all the utilities within the space?
Right. And because part of our business model, and, like you mentioned, Kenny, during the pandemic, during COVID, ghost kitchens started to pop up. And that's kind of how our story began. Our CEO, my partner, Jay, we've been longtime friends for, 15 plus years. And, he was interested in opening his own restaurant pre-COVID. And then, once COVID hit, decided, he couldn't necessarily do that. So he started exploring ghost kitchens as an option. And we recognized there was nobody there supporting the restaurateur. It was more like a set it and forget it approach, sign a lease, and then you're on your own. So our goal has always been to, make this a centralized location where everybody can feel like it's their own business, it's their own space. So part of that was having sub panels at every unit, having everything sub-metered, having everything individually set up. So it is their space at the end of the day. And we also have individual control. So it's not like, a DOAS unit goes down and the whole building goes down, or there's an electrical issue and nobody can operate for the day. So all that coordination was so important to make sure our operators at the end of the day face less issues.
Yeah. I mean, just the idea that you could basically just focus on, I'm not a chef, so it seems though, based on my engineering knowledge, that you can focus on just choosing what equipment you want to fit under the hood and get up and running with, you got the sink ready to go. You just put your stuff here, you do a little bit of storage if you need it, and then you essentially connect to this gas line, whatever fits.
Essentially,
and
if you ask some of our operators, I guarantee you it's not that simple, right?
Sorry, my apologies, I oversimplified that. I'm the engineer.
But we try to make it as simple as possible. So that goes soup to nuts, right? Yeah. Day one, we're starting you with the onboarding process. We're helping with health department licensing, with your business license, insurance, soup to nuts, making sure if you need our help, you have it. If you don't, if you're an experienced operator, you already got your setup, bring your equipment, you're good to go, plug and play.
A nice resource. We run into that we talked to Charlie Baker at BDR. They help
he was
get through the permitting process.
Instrumental on that sinkhole.
Okay.
Charlie.
Yeah. So let's hear what is this sinkhole all about?
So during, they were making the final connection to the sewer sanitary. And so they dug a pit and they were ready to go. And all of a sudden you just had 17 feet of the road start to collapse right out front of our building. Now, mind you, multiple things are happening at the same time here. That needs to get completed. We have an open house scheduled, I think, in 2 weeks at that point. And the city of Richmond had notified us they were shutting down the street, our portion of the street, anytime during that 2 weeks because they were repaving and resealing everything. So we needed to get a sinkhole fixed. We need to support the ground. We need to get our sewer sanitary connected. We need to get that hole filled. We need to make sure the city comes through on time so we can have our open house. It was a shit show to say the least, right?
Talk about I mean, I know we're on season 2 design, but let's do a throwback on that. I mean, that's a coordination nightmare.
Yeah.
Who are the main players that made all of that?
Yeah. So namely, I mean, Charlie Baker and his team, Ashley Blankenship over at Urban Core. I mean, Ashley is a rock star, right? Yeah. She was our right hand during the entire project, and I listened to her episode the other day, just what she speaks to as far as clear communication, transparency, having the hard conversations is extremely important. And that's what she did throughout the entire process is these are the options in front of us. Let's figure out, how we can get the most out of each single option and go forward rather than, whether it's trying to cover up things or make mistakes without anybody knowing. There's plenty of contractors who will just find a way without necessarily looping the owner in. And that's not what they do over there at all.
Yeah. After that episode is when I realized we were in for a fun ride with, man, this is industry. I've been in this industry for a long time and I can't believe how much there is to explore that we've yet to just uncover. And that's what's been fun about it. And then as we had more and more conversations, it kept being brought up the owner, the risk an owner brings to a project. Your willingness to trust, I think, reduces risk quite a bit because you're trusting professionals, trust but verify, challenging and asking, well, what about this and what about that? Which quite frankly is helpful for us.
Yeah.
Right. Helps us think outside the box. We get so stuck on engineering thing, and suddenly somebody will say something. It's like, well, that won't work, but and that connection comes from those ideas.
And it's to nobody's fault, right? Everybody knows what they know. And, I'll give you a perfect example. We asked Umrit to draw up something for our office. And we told him, exact specs that we need, right? We need this many chairs to fit. We need this many desks. This is the length, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, he's an architect. He's going to make it work, right? He's not looking from an operational lens. And that's the other thing as an owner, you have to constantly be looking from that lens because it's not just, everybody involved in a construction project, owner, architect, engineer, GC, they're looking at project completion, right? They're not looking at how this is going to work after the fact. And that's what we as owners have to do. And, same goes to you guys. You guys can draw up stamped drawings for anything we need, right? I ask you for something, you're going to get it to me. Doesn't mean it's going to work. Not necessarily, right? You're not operators. So we have to ask those questions, but like you said, the trust involved from the other side as well to be able to say, okay, well, they're asking me this question. I should think about it and not just say, well, that's not how we do it.
Knowing our limitations is important. Yeah. But between trade and the engineer, this is a big one because it's kind of this all battle all the time between the trade contractors and the engineers, and it's just damn engineers, fucking trade So one thing we talked about before we started is just the idea of a Venn diagram and being more honest and more transparent about what our strengths are and our weaknesses are, and just letting the other person do those things and focus on them. And then the owner brings to the table those operational thoughts, the user input. Right. We talk about, when you do light switches and receptacle layouts, right? You guys.
Oh yeah. From a code perspective, commercial receptacle layouts really aren't required a whole lot. I mean, you could have one receptacle in here and be code compliant. So something we bring up early on during the consulting process with the owner or tenant is, hey, put some thought into where you want these receptacles, right? I can give you whatever it is that you want. And say, oh yeah, just put them wherever, and then a year from now they have something that they need to be plugged in and they can't reach it. It's like, whose fault is that? It's like, put some more time into thinking about the things we're asking you to.
Yeah. And it's really easy to finger point and blame, and say, well, the engineer should have thought of this, or why didn't the contractor think of this? And it's not that it's not their job, but owners also need to take some of that accountability. We did it, I would say mid-project is when we realized we need to take that accountability.
I did notice, we had a lot of like receptacle changes at the very end, and it was probably because you're starting to be like, wait, that doesn't make sense. What the hell, and we try to say that early on. The last person you want to do a receptacle layout is an engineer who doesn't know your business. I mean, we're just going to place them sort of where they kind of make sense, but like right here, this is data power for this piece of equipment right here. That's part of the operations. Yeah. So in this season, we're talking about design, and this is a good segue into where you are. And it's a huge question to even ask you, how do you start designing this kind of place? I mean, but I guess at the origin, it starts with the business plan.
Right.
And then eventually you start thinking about the brick and mortar. I mean, tell us about the design process as best you can. Listen.
For us, the design process really started after we purchased the building. Because we're doing, a readaptive use. We're not, going ground up, not building everything brand new. Once we bought the building and understood what we were working with, then it started with the numbers. Let's say on the owner's side, we're looking at how much do we pay for this? How much revenue do we need out of this? How many kitchens can we fit in here? Okay. Or how many do we need to fit in here? And then common areas. What else do we need to fit in here? And so that's when, the conversation starts with the Fulton Sings to, let's say, okay, we want 16 kitchens in here. We think we can do it. I think we had originally told them, I want to say 18 or 20 kitchens that we tried to fit. But obviously too small a building for that.
Engineers always want these giant rooms.
Right. And, at the end of the day, they would have made it work, but then we wouldn't have had any office space or lobby space or a walk-in cooler that's as large. So it comes to starting, I would say, with all the needs of the project, right? And a lot of that's driven by the numbers. Once we have our needs in place, now we go to the drawing board. And I don't know how many iterations of the layout we went through before we were comfortable with one. But even still, after the fact, you realize, like I said, we can design an office exactly how we think it's going to go. But once you actually physically step foot in there, it's like, it's not what I envision in terms of size, space, etc. But as an owner, I don't want to just go and blame the architect or blame the engineer and say, well, this wasn't built to spec. No, at the end of the day, I have to take a mental note that, okay, next time I'm doing this project, I have to either look out for that or ask that question up front or make sure that's factored in.
What are some of those biggest things you would take forward into it, lessons learned that you from this experience at this building?
I mean, what you guys are doing this podcast about is coordination. That is the biggest thing on a project like ours. And honestly, even cookie cutter things like multifamily or, single family residential. Coordination is so important because that's where money is saved. That's where money is spent. I would say the captive air installation, best example, right? And we had plenty of kickoff meetings. We had plenty of calls throughout our process, right? But things still get lost in the mix where Captive Air gives these amazing wiring diagrams and, a full set of plans. So, the mechanical guys in the field don't really have to question too much. But had we done a coordination meeting with all the trades, with all the MEP trades and the Captive Air guys to say, okay, Captive Air wiring is going through here, but we also have our duct runs going through here. We have our plumbers, plumbing lines through here. If everybody understood where they were in terms of, the stacking and the steps involved of installation, we could have avoided a lot of issues, because we did have to go back and rewire things. And that was just a coordination thing, had nothing to do with the drawings or anything else.
Yeah, there's so much detail, especially in a restaurant like this, that there does need to be a lot of attention to that through the process. We delegate. I'm sure you've heard us talk about, we delegate coordination drawings, but rarely they get done because, as you mentioned, they're expensive.
Yeah.
You could do BIM modeling and spend 50 or the example I give people to just so they understand how much it costs.
Right.
Is the building we did. It was a Virginia Tech building. We did just the modeling. It was like $80,000 or $100,000 of services, and that was mechanical only. That wasn't the electrical and plumbing. And we would have done that engineering for it probably for 30, 40 grand.
Right.
So the engineering, I think, and this is where we are advocating outward, at least in light commercial market, the engineering is a lot more conceptual than I think people expect it to be.
Yeah.
They
Well, and I
expect
think
it to be
that's driven
coordination
by
drawings.
the fact that engineering is based on numbers. So you expect it to be exact, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not true. It's just a guide.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, air is, I always tell people, in mechanical engineering, it's kind of like predicting the weather.
Right.
Especially for DOAS, you're like thinking, the outdoor air will be like this statistically, probably for 15 years.
And that's exactly right. We had issues the first few months of, just smells from outside. And this is even before we had operators in here.
Yeah.
Just gotten CO'd, and, there's a lot of restaurants around. So their air getting pulled into our building. And it's like, exactly like you said, we definitely anticipated the weather, but we didn't anticipate, a wind gust of 30 miles an hour blowing right into our DOAS unit and pulling into a kitchen. But those are the things that you just can't really plan for every little detail.
With that much makeup air.
Yeah.
How many units did you say? I should know it.
We have 7.
7. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. 4 DOAS units, 3 RTUs.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. So those listening and the engineers of the world will be very happy to hear that the engineering that went into this. Ben, shout out Ben Ricky, who no longer works at Permit, but he was the engineer on this one and did a great job. And that's where I started learning about the captive air DOAS and their support for it. Can you speak to? I mean, they do a pretty good job supporting it?
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, Jacob and Jacob, those are our guys. Our engineer and sales guy down in Atlanta. They are still with us. They've done a phenomenal job throughout, but their services team, locally, their, back end support, CastLink as a resource, just being able to log in and see status and adjust set points,
that's huge,
right? All of that, because now we have, a local mechanical company that does our preventative maintenance. They're managing our CastLink, right? So we don't need to go to Captive Air unless it's a much bigger issue, a warranty issue or something like that.
Captive Air. We talk about y'all so much. We gotta. I talked to them the other day. They're saying we might be able to get into their where they make all the at their research and development facility. With
I'll have
their
Jacob
head
take
engineer.
you guys on a tour.
Yeah, dude, do an episode with them.
That'd be sweet.
As we speak highly of them too for the same reason. They stand behind their product and the remote access. I was at the ASHRAE thing, and one of the sales reps had a little issue in this field, so he logged into the DOAS and changed a set point and problem solved.
Exactly. And it definitely comes at a cost, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's a matter of how much do you want to value engineer your product? You can save a lot. Of money, but there's going to be a trade-off. Right.
Start sending some of our clients in Jarnell to talk about it.
You're like, if you don't believe me, talk to this guy.
But you have to see what you value up front. Yeah. And if you're only looking to save money, you have to be willing to accept the trade-offs. Because I'm not speaking down on that. You can, we looked at other hood systems and we considered not going DOAS and all that. Yeah. But, to my earlier point, we wanted the space to be as comfortable as possible. And that was a prime focus for us to have that kind of space for our tenants.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it wholeheartedly. You have it. I mean, the other side of that is we had Benny's, I talked to Chris and they just got a different vibe. I mean, they started their first restaurant with, I think he said, air conditioner units in the wall.
In Blacksburg,
Right.
So they'll just throw up the hood and get rolling with it and then shut the restaurant down when it's hot. But, that's a pizza joint, very different than, especially this is your home, basically. Right. You don't even have a dining place to go. This is full out production. You're just thinking, mention somebody here has like how many brands?
There's one tenant who's got 7 brands. He's going out of one kitchen.
Wow. That's pretty cool. Just cranking it.
Yeah. And so whether it's you personally or your staff, somebody's going to be in there, easily 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so you want the space to be comfortable. They can't, they can't just go out into the dining room and have a seat. They,
Yeah.
they're stuck in here and they're cooking and they're pumping out food. But that's also why we want to make the space so inviting outside of your kitchen. So we got a nice break room, make sure the aesthetics in the wall, outside of the climate control, everything is, a place where you feel happy to come every single day.
So is it a blend of like caterers and people doing point of sale directly here? And like,
so, I mean, our facility is just built out for delivery optimization, right? So we try to lead with our tenants, as far as you should have main brands of yours that you're operating out of here. Okay. And then we have some who like to have additional catering on the side. That's a big facet of their business as well. Some have food trucks that they operate additionally. Some are doing, wholesale of their items. So it's kind of a mixture of all those things, but really to be successful here, your main business should be pumping out food on the delivery apps.
Gotcha. Just a distribution kitchen, basically a distribution center of like ready to make.
Yeah. And then more than anything, a ghost kitchen operation is a marketing operation. Yeah. It's obviously about the quality of your food and how quickly it's getting out there and all that. But it's about the exposure on the delivery apps and how much you're really focusing on marketing yourself digitally, which, frankly, a lot of operators have had no experience with. On a brick and mortar, you've got something on the street that people are walking by. You've got a lot of word of mouth and they can say, oh, go down to this street to this restaurant. With ghost kitchens, online is almost 100% of your presence.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about doing a series, just kind of a separate series from the podcast that are more of like tips and tricks. And one I'd love to do is for restaurants, people that are doing their first restaurant. Like one of them could be just check out this place, and get something going, get some cash flow, get some revenue going or whatever it is, learn and refine your brand, refine their food. And if you decide to go brick and mortar, here's the top 5 things you would never guess.
Right.
Which completely blindside you. And they have nothing to do with, it's all like mostly HVAC, those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'll give you a couple examples out of our building. Like, we had, shout out to Latin Quarter. They're local with, a great food truck. They started their food truck during the pandemic. They signed a lease with us. They were our second tenant at that point and grew their business, did phenomenally. They just exited last month.
Nice.
And, sad to see them go, but we like to say they graduated. They opened a brick and mortar, down south of Richmond. Yeah. They just opened it a couple weeks ago. Everybody go check it out. Food's great.
Oh, yeah. And with the link down there.
Yeah. We're super happy for them. And that's kind of what we want to see out of people in our facility. Now, on the other side, you've got, like you mentioned, our tenant with 7 brands. That's RVA Cafe, Chef DQ. He had a brick and mortar and he understood how to optimize the delivery apps. And then he came into our facility and now he's running everything out of here. So he did the flip side of recognizing, well, I can make a lot more revenue and run much more streamlined business inside of a ghost kitchen than I am in a brick and mortar.
Yeah, because operationally, you cut out the whole dining and hospitality portion of that part of the restaurant. I've never run a restaurant, so forgive me making assumptions of what it's like, but I mean, I would imagine that's a huge part of the operation. Front of house staff and wait staff and
your labor costs, your linens, your dishes, all that, your insurance, everything starts to go down, right?
Yeah.
Now, what I like to tell people is that doesn't mean that all your overhead is down, right? You still have rent and you still have all that. At the same time, you have to shift some of that to marketing and promotions.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a one-to-one savings. Yeah. You do need to reinvest that money on the digital front, because you have to get exposure out there.
So talking design again, I mean, for the very, very early stages, so you have this experience in construction in the multifamily and real estate and multifamily commercial. And then you had this idea, like where did that come from? And how did you start sketching it out and producing that design of a business,
Yeah. So, like I was saying, my partner, Jay, he comes from the restaurant industry. His family owned pizza places growing up. We both grew up in New Jersey. He went into banking. He was at Bank of America for a number of years. And then he was doing his MBA out on the West Coast. And he was ready to take the jump into the restaurant industry. It's a passion he just never let go of, and was like, you know what, before, I go get a better job and I start to go back into the corporate world, I want to try my shot at restaurants. So he started exploring and was going to buy a bunch of food trucks, had a great business plan, for a restaurant concept drawn up. And then the pandemic hit. And so he wasn't going to invest in food trucks at that point. And he went to the drawing board of how can I continue to pursue this passion? And when he looked at ghost kitchens as an option, he saw there was a lot of things missing, as far as support, whether that's onboarding or operational support, understanding how the apps work, all of it. There was no support from the existing ghost kitchen industry. Let's call it Ghost Kitchens 1.0, that were really just around for a couple of years at that point. That when me and him started brainstorming, it was literally a 2-hour brainstorm session on my couch. All of a sudden we're like, you know what, we can do this a better way. We can focus on, where we're buying the right real estate, make sure we focus on the operator. How are we going to help them grow? What resources do they need? And we just hit the ground running. It was probably 2 months of conversations coming up with a succinct business plan. And then we just went out hunting properties.
That's crazy. So what does it look like if I'm wanting to do this? What kind of questions do you usually ask and make sure somebody kind of aligns with the model that you have?
For sure. It's your cooking experience is key, right? How much experience do you have in the kitchen? Have you ever done any business like this before? How much liquid cash do you have? Because at the end of the day, you are running a business. Yeah. Part of our vetting process isn't just, do you have we approximate $30,000 that you need in order to start a business here, but do you have enough for 3 to 6 months of losses? Yeah. Right. Because you're not going to make a profit day one. It's going to take at least 6 months to get there. And that's still great compared to the restaurant industry, right? The overall industry, you'd be lucky if you break even in 1.5 years, 2 years. Yeah. So we want you to break even in 6 months. Do you have enough liquid cash to hold you over? Right? What's the rest of your world look like? What's your family look like? What are you doing outside of here that could impact here? Just understanding all that and going through we have a very, not long, but a decent size interview process with the prospective tenants, because it's a two-way relationship. Oh, yeah. We're not just looking to sign leases with anybody who's willing to pay, because then we're not going to be successful either. We want to have retention in here.
Yeah, that's kind of why I mentioned catering. You're like, well, that's not really a good fit. Right. Some people might do that here, but we're looking for people that want to build brands and build and this kiosk
great
out
supplemental
front,
piece of the business, right? Yeah. Which it should be. You should have multiple revenue streams. Like we've got a great partnership with a company called Easy Cater. It's basically the Uber Eats, DoorDash of the catering world. Oh, cool. So they source, large scale employers and companies that are looking for, catering orders for, any of their employees or anything like that. And it's a great platform where, we put all of our tenants on there and people can order directly, and, you get a great order of, $300, $400, $500 in one shot out of there. Right. But you can't depend on that, for one. And two, you can't shut down your kitchen every day to do a catering order and still be servicing the apps. Yeah.
We this is totally off topic, but we were going to start a podcast studio in Hopewell where we both live in, and we have to edit that out, but where we both live. Remind me to mark down where we did that so I don't dox you on accident. But so the idea is we're going to do it and have a podcast studio, but then maybe lease it out. But like, we have to interrupt our operations. So yeah, it's a completely different operational thing, right? We either produce orders that fly out the door and you're just a production house, and then you have to basically shut down and produce. I've seen my wife do it. She's done catering. It's like the whole kitchen is for that. And so that's.
And it's like any other business, right? What you want to do is your core business, what you started with, what your business plan is, find out how to make that successful. Yeah. Right. Once you've figured that out, now let's start adding layers to it. Right. And so we've done the same thing here at Chef Suite, where we were not interested or focused on, hourly rentals or short-term rentals. We do 6 to 24 month leases. Yeah. For us in the restaurant industry, that's a short-term lease. Otherwise, you got to sign a 5-10 year plus lease at a brick and mortar. So that was our main focus. Once we figured that out, now we're starting to add in, shorter term, monthly rentals, things like that, because operationally, we can't try to figure it all out at the same time. Right.
What would be the biggest advice you could give to somebody wanting to do this? You mentioned the cash, but anything, like the biggest piece of advice?
Be open and willing to learn. Yeah. It's kind of like what I said earlier, where know what you don't know. If you're not a tech person, right, be willing to, be open about that and embrace the fact that you're going to have to learn a little something here. Yeah. And that's part of our interview process too, is how tech savvy are you? Yeah. Because your face is going to be in an app all day long.
Yeah, because these orders, I guess, get sent to this, and that's the kind of to this here.
Exactly. So you can place an order through any of the delivery apps. You can go directly to our website, www.chefsuite.com.
Put it in the links.
Or you can come right up to our door. We have got a kiosk at the front. All our brands are displayed there. You can pick whatever you want. The ticket gets printed right into every tenant's kitchen. They've got the app control right through their iPad over here. They print it out. They make the food. They put it on a shelf right outside. Our food expediters bring it right to the front and hand it off to the delivery driver. And effectively, if the tenant doesn't want to leave their kitchen, they don't have to.
I mean, that's pretty amazing that all of that operational stuff is just ready to go. There's definitely still a lot of planning for the person, but it allows them to focus on the branding, the line, the equipment, the food, everything. Just the real down to the nuts business operation. And you've really taken care of a lot of stuff that we've seen completely kill projects. I won't mention the particular project, but we just had one that unfortunately you don't have enough money for the HVAC. I mean, the budget for the whole project was less than, a quarter of what they would need for just the HVAC, but they'd already put all this time and they were excited. I think we're under lease and all this stuff. And I don't know. I just had to say, I don't know. I won't even engineer it. I couldn't even just take that money because there's no way if that's your budget.
What kind of project was that?
It was a retrofit on a first floor of a 3-story building. And it was a kitchen. It was a brick and mortar kind of regular restaurant type thing, and they had a hood and everything. And it was just so many challenges for that building. But I think they thought they could, a lot of people think that they could plug a hood in. Yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing, right? And that, not to say that I was aware of this earlier, right? But it's something I learned as well. It's, well, when I'm trying to explain to whether it's our partners or anybody why 30 to 40% of our budget is MEP, that is hard for somebody to grasp. But when you really break it down and understand how much is going into not just the connection to the hood, but how everything is interconnected, it starts to make a lot more sense. But it's not something people realize. It's not just as simple as hooking up a hood, right? Yeah. There's the hood, there's the fire suppression, there's the ECM boards, there's literally everything that, could be connected has to be connected together.
You could be MEP engineer by this point after. I swear. All the stuff you've learned from it. That you're right, though. Even though you guys have the right equipment to spec, stays comfortable, even with that, it's still very difficult to just get it up and off the ground. And people just don't understand how complicated that is. Well, of course you have all these hoods. Most people have just one.
Right.
But what I've been telling people, you may be able to say this is true, that you could do the value engineering or devalue engineering, get different stuff. And I could try to kind of make it work with cheaper equipment. But then, I mean, who are you going to hire to do the work?
Right.
They're probably not going to be experienced in a restaurant if you're going that cheap on it. And now they're probably going to struggle installing it right. It's going to be a nightmare, and it's going to get all these delays and confusion and controls. If the system already, like for this building, is ready made for controls and you still struggle getting the controls tuned. Yeah. Imagine trying to do that with 5 split system air handlers that are meant for a residential unit and all that,
Yeah, you're never going to get your volume right. You're never going to get your temperature right.
Building pressure issues all over the place and
moisture.
Yeah.
Moisture.
Yeah. Well, that's what's beautiful about DOS is you can dehumidify the inside, with all these boiling, pots of water and everything, and the hoods can take it out, but it's still, problematic. So that's, I gotta say, I love that we are in a place with an owner that can stand by that. And it seems like you appreciate that the money was spent on the right equipment.
And I will be extremely honest and say, I wasn't sure of that during the process.
Yeah.
I didn't know why we were spending all this money necessarily. I mean, obviously we had decided to, we had, we felt good about why we were doing it, but on paper, it didn't make sense to me that we were spending this much on a hood and this much on a DOAS unit. But looking at how it could have been done, in hindsight, very glad we spent the money.
Buyer's remorse. It would just be nothing. I always 100%. Tell people there's basically right, and then there's a little bit cheaper and just absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
If you try to save that $100,000 or whatever it is, you can save the money, but then what you end up buying is you might as well just burn the money. Right. It's just not going to work.
Yeah. And I think that's something that, hopefully everybody learns from experience. I definitely have, where it's better to spend that money up front to avoid certain issues, even though you're still going to have some issues down the road, than to assume, okay, well, I'm going to have issues anyway, so I'm not going to spend that money right now because I'll have to deal with something anyway. Because that's the mentality that it's not like I can avoid every issue. So why would I try to avoid any issues?
I mean, just going back to the design of this business and the concept here, that all of that, it's really hard for somebody to appreciate how much you've been through and the challenge of the coordination design of all of this. And if you're a restaurant owner and you want to start your own brick and mortar, this is absolutely unbearably complicated and expensive and stressful, and it can break you, and you're allowing people that want to get into the industry the opportunity to focus on what they love in the first place, which is the food, the brand, what they want to do, and figure out if they even want to do it. Some people, it's their first business, and I don't know about you, but when you start your own business, you're like, wait, wow, owning a business is very different than I thought.
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to be this, right? And I think that's a really good point, because you don't consider, when you're doing a brick and mortar, let's say, of, okay, yeah, maybe you can figure out, hire the right engineers, hire the right GC, and everything gets installed seamlessly, right? But you don't consider that if I have a problem that, is affecting the main electrical of the building, now I got to wait for my landlord to fix this or approve it, right? And things like that, where you're not considering the further ramifications of this complicated system that you have set up. And that's where we try to take that off of our tenants entirely.
Yeah. You're also giving your tenants the same, or your operators the same value that it sounded like you got from Urban Core, like having those hard conversations up front, asking them all those uncomfortable questions.
Right.
Are you ready to do this, or you're not? Or if you are, where are you weak? Where are you strong? Where can we help? Like, that's a huge mental load.
And I think it's just, it's humility, right? I think everybody in life, doesn't matter what you're doing, you need a bit of humility, where Urban Core was straightforward with us that, yes, we've done a ton of restaurants and we are the restaurant guys if you want to hire somebody, but we've never done this, right? And so that alone helped us build trust that, okay, we can work together, and we know what they don't know, we know what we don't know, and we can help each other get to the right place.
Do you remember who the mechanical contractor was?
It was Green Air.
Okay.
And Tribble did
the electric. Yep.
Yeah. We
and International Plumbing was a plumber.
These like multi-tenant buildings. From our perspective, you can do them a million different ways.
Right.
It was a lot on the consulting side for us, and shout out to Amrit for help piecing all the pieces of the puzzle together.
Right.
To help us figure that out.
He is built for, I don't know, de-escalation and stress management. I don't know. Like, he's got like ASMR voice.
Yeah, he's got the voice. He's solution based. I keep telling him he needs to run for mayor of Richmond. He's the guy that everybody's happy to glad hand with.
He can persuade me to do almost anything. Almost on it. But I keep asking to be on here, but he doesn't want to be on the podcast. But
you gotta help us convince him.
I'll harass him a little bit.
But I always enjoy my conversations with him. We've had our ups and downs ourselves. This the way the industry is, but he's always got something insightful to say. I remember when I first started this idea, he contributed in the sense of just talking about it with me before it became a thing. Just, wow, cool, really cool. He had connected me with Todd. That's how I know Todd.
Yeah,
we did the Todd is a structural guy who just started his thing.
Oh, nice.
But so what is some of the biggest challenges that people have to overcome when they start doing this? Like,
I think the tech is a big challenge and continues to be to a certain extent, right? And part of that is the apps are constantly changing. So whether that's they're changing their algorithm of how you're going to get exposure, and you continue fighting that, they're changing their promotion structure, their fee structure. The tech side is something that somebody walking in has to be ready for. And it took us a few months to understand that we need to make that a bigger part of the vetting process, the onboarding process.
Social media marketing, all of that is probably tied into that same skill set.
Very much.
Are you
so.
ready to start doing that part of your business?
Right.
Because that's huge. I mean, I don't get it. I mean, we were in work from homelands in COVID, and we just started being humans again in front of other humans.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, I think any marketing person, our CMO, Samira, like, she's phenomenal, but she'll be the first one to tell you, like, nobody appreciates the work marketers do.
Yeah.
And it's really because they themselves can't quantify the effect it's going to have. It's always looking back. It's always retroactive. That, okay, well, we spent $30,000 on marketing and promotions, but it's not until 6 months later where you see the revenue, and you usually can't directly tie one to the other. There's no direct correlation. So they get shit on.
Yeah.
And it's sad because really it is a labor of love. It is difficult because they're always trying to find the best way to target the right customer and get the exposure that we need. But there's nothing that's directly quantifying the result that they're achieving.
Compared to like just direct sales, where it's like every PO I get, it's like a sales transaction. It's like measurable and there's dollars, whereas marketing is more strategic. Like, okay, well, we went through this with permits. If we've changed a lot of things, and part of the podcast is rebuilding trust with some folks, because we've changed some of our changed who we are, and broke a little trust and along the way, and learned and became better engineers, I believe, and now provide a better service overall. But that trust is hard to build, and it was a marketing thing. We were going to first do lunch and learns, and I was like, whatever, what if we just sit down and talk? And that's what this became. And it's been really helpful for us to just kind of figure out what we don't know. We've learned we don't know a lot, which nobody like you said, that's one of your points, is like, you got to be willing to start there.
Yeah.
A lot more than we thought. And, I get it. We're engineers, a little bit of hubris. We try not to be that, but it's hard. We all struggle with it.
It's hard not to have a bit of hubris when you know you're good at something. You've let's say just become an expert in your field to a certain extent, right? It's hard to be questioned on that by anybody, especially somebody who's not an engineer, who's a trades guy. And it's like, you don't know what goes into me putting together drawings and the calculations we have to do and the code we have to review, right? As a guy who's in the field installing it, right? So to be questioned by that, it's not easy.
Yeah.
But I think if you want to get better at what you do, you have to be willing to take those hard questions and say, okay, well, if somebody who doesn't understand what I do needs, has a question or is challenging me, if I can get them to understand, then I'm even better than I thought at my job.
There's what's that Gandhi quote? There's at our office in Kochi, there's right when you walk up to the elevator, you look into the bank, and there's this quote from Gandhi talking about the customer. Like, don't be frustrated with the customer.
Yeah, they're the reason, not the
problem.
Right.
Yeah, because it's easy if you get the same question 1,000 times, be like,
right.
Let me answer it again. But that's like the reason we're here.
It's like the second time they've asked you the question, but it's the 2000th time you've heard it.
Yeah.
In the past, like, 2 months.
And I frankly believe, like, okay, they're asking the question, whoever they are, because they don't know the answer. You're the expert. That's why they're asking you the question, right? Yeah. And it's not their job to know the answer.
Yep.
So it's our job to give it to them, no matter what capacity you're in. Yep. And you cannot expect somebody, especially in this industry, to do what you want by talking down to them.
Oh,
it's just
God.
never going to happen.
It just goes.
There's more egos in the room than I've ever seen, right? So you have to be willing to take a step back and say, all right, how do we resolve this? And I think that's partly why it works the way it does, that everybody's happy to retroactively fix issues and, deal with unforeseen conditions, mainly because they're comfortable in that space of, resolving things to get to the end.
Yeah.
Everybody's focused on the end of the project. That's the shared goal that they have in mind outside of everything else. So they're used to this negotiation and this push and pull, and let's figure out issues and resolve them, no matter how heated conversations get, because they all want to get to the end. And no matter how much ego anybody has, no matter how tough they seem, they're not going to walk away from the project. Nobody wants to go to court.
Oh yeah.
Right.
God.
So they're going to resolve it with you. If you can keep your cool and you can have some humility, it'll bring them down eventually.
And there'll always be that one asshole, but
sometimes I've been that guy. Sometimes you've probably been that guy.
I know,
right?
I've been that guy to you. But sorry, all these fucking.
I forgot we had sound effects.
Yeah, I know. We totally forget. There's a couple of horn opportunities in this.
There you go.
Amrit used to do that in the office all the time, walking around.
Oh yeah, you guys shared an office for a while, right? Yeah,
we still technically do, but we never go there. We always work from home. What were we talking about? Trust, relationships, things going sour, trust hurdles. I like that phrase that Stuart Evans from Evans Construction uses. Just it's always a trust hurdle with somebody. For us as a trade contractor, little trust hurdle to be like, try not to get in that you suck, I suck type thing.
Yeah.
Like I always try to start there. So that, my litmus test is this. If I can send you a meme, if I know what kind of meme you would laugh at, like we've achieved the trust
100%,
hurdle.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. The judgment thing we talked about with Ron is key too. Like we're so guilty of somebody asking us a technical question, and we'll go down the rabbit hole of trying to give them every single solution to the 3 questions they ask. And what they really want without asking it is, what do you think?
Right.
paying us for our judgment. I'm sure you've dealt with that with the operators here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would say I've more. You guys have probably dealt with that for me because that's what we did through a lot of the process with vendors, right? Where especially doing this for the first time, we're looking for feedback. We're not necessarily looking for a technical answer of like right and wrong. It's like, what do you think about this? How do you think this is going to play out? And I would say it's not necessarily fair, but that's what you're looking for from a subject matter expert, right? Of their judgment call to a certain extent, and the liability associated with anybody in the industry, whether that's real estate or construction. Everybody's constantly fearful of that, and so nobody wants to say, "Well, this is how you should do it."
I always just say, my best way to answer it with an honest answer is just, if it was my money and if it was my building, this is what I would do.
Right.
You do it yourself. I'm a different person, but for me, I would handle it this way because of these risks, like HVAC, value engineering. I wouldn't remove this feature. I just wouldn't, knowing that it's only $3,000 and knowing what you're foregoing for that.
Right.
I would never let that, and it would be buyer's remorse.
100%.
I was also, we talk about change orders and that stress and all the industry is a litigious thing. I'm sure a lot of people would like to know from the owner's perspective, the one that always gets the email of a change order. How quickly do you get change order fatigue? Like, how do you deal with that? Like constant barrage, I'm sure, of just more cost.
I would say this, right? We built in enough contingency for one, which was great. Even just the budgeting process, Urban Core was really great to deal with and extremely helpful. The change orders we had were strictly driven by unforeseen conditions or direct changes that we as owners said, we don't like this. We want a new selection. We want a better fixture, design, whatever. Those were driven by us. Luckily, we didn't have any change orders that could have been, quote, avoided. Yeah. The only way they could have been avoided if we had built 10 of these before and we knew exactly what we wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Like there was a spec that you needed because it was your 10th time. You're like, this is going to get done and it's missed. You're like, man, okay.
Because it's like, I think you had mentioned before, outlet placement, things like that. Something as simple as that light switch behind you. In some units, it's on the other side of the wall.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And that's because in the field or based on the drawings, it says basically put it 2 inches from the wall, but it doesn't say which side of the wall. Right. Yeah. And so it's getting installed where the installer in the field thinks it makes the most sense. And had we known that, that's what they're going to do for one, or we need to give more direction, or this is exactly where we want it, we would have made that clear.
So from a design, that's a design element, I use the phrase nose blind because I don't know what to call it, but just the engineers are just blind to some common sense stuff. Like that, because we're so in this weird abstract world of like overcurrent protection and conductors and all of this transformer rating and so sometimes the most obvious stuff is just so embarrassing to be on a plan. You're like, yep, I see it. I see it right now, plain as day, right in front of me. I've been staring at it the whole time. So that's fun to deal with as an engineer, but
and all that's experience based, right?
Yeah.
You learn from each project and you start to grow, and each individual is going to make a decision consciously or not of, do I want to retain and use this information, or am I going to stay in my box and just plug and play and do what I know how to do? Yeah. Some people are going to grow their business or just grow their, knowledge base because of that, because they want to know more and they want to do more. And it's kind of like what you guys do with the podcast. Indirectly or directly, it's going to affect how you run your business.
Oh, it's totally transformed so much of our perspective. We thought we knew something.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, Charlie in the land use and development process, that whole thing and lending. I'd like to get like lenders. That would be kind of cool. Like bankers, people are part of the underwriting process. And because you mentioned 30 or 40% of this is MEP.
Right.
And so in the contingency and lending and risk is also tied to it, but we're so far from that.
1000%. And because this is a new concept, it's not multifamily or industrial warehouse where, lenders are underwriting this day in, day out. They don't know how to underwrite this. Yeah. So we weren't able to get financing for the construction of the project.
Really?
Yeah. This was all out of pocket.
Wow.
Right. We got financing after the fact from Village Bank, which is, worked out great. Yeah. But nobody would underwrite this as a construction deal.
Wow.
Because of the budget. It just did not make sense to them.
So they had to see some sort of cash flow in business and be like, okay, I see. Exactly. Now we'll refinance or something like that, cash out. Wow. So yeah, that's kind of like doing it in a small scale, like a single family house where you do it in cash and refi out type situation.
Exactly.
Wow, that's pretty. This is why I think a lender would be critical to the conversation. Those things, engineers don't even. We have engineering econ. It's about all we usually learn. I know only some of the things
what
about.
What are they teaching that? I'm curious.
I mean, the future of time value of money.
Yeah, time value of money. And P given F and A given F.
The basics of a balance sheet.
Okay. But it's just the Econ 101.
Yeah, pretty much. Nothing fundamentally practical, directly applicable to. We don't talk about construction loans and how underwriting works, or we don't really talk about underwriting at all. What risk is and how to predict it and how to make a deal work and cash flow and market cap rate or cap rates.
Cap rates, yeah,
all that stuff. And I only know it just because you run a business, you just learn these things over time. But I don't think engineers, they're traditional engineers, have any of that background. And if they did, it would be, great on the consulting side.
Yeah.
They understood the underwriting and how this needs to work on paper.
Right. Because it's just a supplement to your business, right? You're not trying to be an investment banker. Yeah. Right. Or you're not trying to go into, direct lending or anything like that. But having a knowledge base of how it works, going to make you better. It's just like spending time for me with the trades directly. Yeah. Means so much for me and my knowledge base, not because I'm going to go out and be an electrician or an engineer or anything like that. Right. But when I'm having those conversations, I speak from a place of, for one, understanding, right. And not just completely having no idea what's going on, but then also being clear about what I know and what I don't know. And I think that helps to build that trust that you keep talking about of letting somebody know where you actually stand. Yeah. If I'm always coming from here, right? And I'm actually down here, they're going to come at me right up here as well. Yeah. Right. So I think it's really important to just have that balance of trust from the beginning of this is what I'm good at. This is what I know. I do know a little bit more than the next guy, right? So you can talk to me like that. You can explain things to me like you would maybe, a peer, but at the same time, I'm relying on you for your expert opinion.
Yeah. If somebody's up there or if somebody's down here and you don't explain it, they're thinking that you maybe don't care to explain. But if they're up there and you explain, you get accused of things like mansplaining.
Yeah, that happened the other day. It's tough as an engineer because it's all so technical. And I don't know what people do or don't know about it. And so it's like, do I just skip it and just run the risk of nobody understanding the problem? Or do I dive? How deep do I dive? And then it's boring on top of that.
There have been plenty of times where I regret asking a question to you guys or to anybody else.
So no, I'm good. Never mind.
Where I'm like, you know what? I want to know about this. And no, I really don't.
Yeah. And I was on a call for a restaurant, they tried to get rid of the DOAS. They tried to get rid of a 15-ton DOAS and replace it with a 6-ton RTU.
Okay.
I was like, so not only are you less than half the tonnage, the kind of equipment
completely different.
It's completely different. This isn't going to work. And then that's where I tried. I like it works if you're fine with it being 95 degrees inside your kitchen and it's totally saturation humidity levels. And apparently I was mansplaining during that. I didn't know. I mean, I'm just an engineer, like pretty much not the most gifted human with humans. Like none of us engineers have that, So we're already struggling with reading people's signals and things like that. On top of that. So who knows? She probably was like, shut up, telling me for all I know. But I thought the meeting went well. Yeah. And then I found out later she thought I was condescending to her and racist. I didn't even know. I honestly didn't even know. I never saw her. Yeah. I don't even know to this day what her race is. But so that's how it came across. And I just made me realize how many times does that happen to me? I don't know,
Yeah, and I think I'm guilty of that plenty of times. I have a tendency to over-explain things, and my wife definitely calls me out all the time on it, right? And she's even told me, she's like, why are you mansplaining? I'm like, I don't mansplain. I just over-explain. Yeah. Like, man, woman, it doesn't matter who you are. I just say too much and talk too much, right? Yeah. And I think you're right. It's just because like I don't know what the other person's knowledge base is. If you tell me like I'm good, I understand that, I'm happy to stop explaining.
Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, if it's interesting, you just I just enjoy talking about it.
That's the other thing. I nerd out on the stuff that I like. So for me, it's like, if you get me talking about it, I'm not going to stop talking about it until you cut me off.
It's best to start with, if you already know this, just tell me to shut up and then you just keep going.
That's a good one. Yeah. You can tell me to shut up. It won't hurt my feelings. Right. But Speaking of nerding out, I want to kind of rewind just a little bit. You mentioned casually it was finance. I mean, it wasn't finance. So cash deal. Did you anticipate that would be the idea? Is cash and then refi out situation?
Yes.
Okay.
We tried to get construction financing for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And then we quickly realized it just wasn't going to happen. So from the beginning, basically, we contemplated that we're just going to have to build this out and then refi. And then, on the next few, we'll likely consider construction financing up front because the market has definitely changed in that regard.
Because I mean, that was a double whammy. It was COVID, so banks were already nervous, and it was a new idea that's never been underwritten. Like, I don't know.
Exactly. And, the larger, multinational banks are never going to look at a deal like this. Maybe if we had, 500, 600 million balance sheet, they might look at it. So you have to go to the local regional banks or go to a private lender. You're going to get killed on private debt. So we don't want to go that route. The local guys, hard money is just not worth it for this type of project. And then a local lender, like you said, you got to educate them so much. So, I mean, even after construction, we're talking during construction with lenders, but having to walk them through the project over and over again and having to walk them through the business plan and really explain to them, just like we have to do with our operators sometimes, of like why this makes sense and, why you should be in this space and all that. That education component is so critical to what we're doing.
Man, that is just a completely different aspect of design. See, that's why this one word motif, season 2 design, I think people think design is just for one, design. People think mechanical design is just a bunch of metal squares, and it's not, right? But then if you back it all the way up, I mean, designing the underwriting is really design. You have to invent and imagine something that would legitimately work, and then persuade and sell others to also believe it, and all at the same time wanting them to challenge it so that you can find the weak spots, but wanting to sell them. So what does that feel like?
It's so interesting because I never considered it that way, right? In terms of design, but that's exactly what it is. When I'm putting together underwriting for any project, I'm trying to thread that needle so finely, like you said, between making the numbers work, having something that I can pitch, but also want to know where the holes are and have something that can adjust to make it work if it doesn't work out the way that I originally thought. It's a tough process for something like this, right? Compared to underwriting multifamily deals I could do in my sleep. Right. That's just
straightforward.
I could do that on the back of a napkin in 30 seconds and tell you if a deal's going to work. With something like a ghost kitchen, well, I don't know anyone who's ever underwritten one before. There are people out there doing it, but I haven't met them. I've never worked with them. I don't know who does it or how they do it. So coming up with that square one, and it's a process we continue. Like it's always fluid. I'm updating our underwriting process on a regular basis because it's not cut and dry, and it never will be until there's like a stabilization of like, this is a ghost kitchen model and we've done 10, 20 of them,
You probably have the coolest spreadsheet in the world of
it's
ghost kitchen.
Large. It's large.
That is wild. I know you probably don't want to give all of the secrets of it, but what are how do you think about it? Like, how do you put it in together in your head?
I'd say for one, obviously thinking about the investment to start, right? The greater thing for us is thinking about the tenants we're going to have in there. What's the demand look like on our side for operating tenants who are going to want to be in this space? What's our demographics look like? I mean, we really start with demographics to see, can this area support 16 new restaurants, right? And realistically, because we want you to do multiple brands out of here, can it support 30, 40 new restaurants? What's the growth looking like? What's the multifamily pipeline looking like? Are there planned units? Are there under construction units? What's our delivery radius going to be? In cities like Richmond, we can probably comfortably do 5 miles, but in other cities, 5 miles is going to take you 25 minutes. So, understanding all those aspects to it are pretty key up front.
So is that what you were doing before underwriting multifamily deals? Is that where your experience is?
That was what I was doing for probably 5-6 years before this.
The developer input is really cool. Duke does a lot. We talked to Duke Dotson, and his feedback was fun, and he does a lot of like commercial projects too. And one of the things he mentioned is the higher contingencies for them, just because, like you said, you could spend all the money on all the pre-con that you want, or just be like, whatever. It's just
just have a catch-all and it'll figure itself out, which it does, right? And it gives you plenty of heartache during the process, and it doesn't make it easier, but it's money. And to your point earlier, Kenny, about selling the deal, makes it easier to sell the deal. Everybody's okay with the contingency and they're happy with it. They know it's needed. They don't want to have a change order for 50 grand down the line. So they'll have a contingency.
Yeah.
But if they see a consulting line item for 50 grand, just so we can make sure the project's good, nobody wants to see that.
Yeah.
Or if they're looking to cut costs, consulting is the first thing you're going to think to cut, right? Services.
Yeah.
Right. I need an HVAC, but I don't need a service.
It's so funny you say that, because that does put the engineers in a precarious situation, and we always have to fight with, because there's often not the money for that service. And so we'll try to make clear we're not going to do that service. Let's say coordination, as obvious or silly some of this stuff might be, we're not doing the coordination drawings. And then it invariably still looks bad on us. So we try to find that balance, like how much is enough to make sure we don't make crazy, stupid mistakes.
Right.
But we always do, because we don't have the same foresight. First of all, we can't contemplate the entire three-dimensional thing, even with $1 million. Like any number of things would make it wrong. Potentially a sprinkler pipe that we didn't expect or whatever. But then it's just not worth it. That's where the trust comes in. That's what we're learning, is just trying to go trust hurdles, be honest with what we're not doing and what we are, and just be a part of the team. And we really sucked at that, I think, in the past 2 years ago. And then the beginning of last year, we started really just correcting, like, we need to be better at figuring out how to do this. Like, we can't just constantly say, no, that's not our scope. You know,
I mean, that's the key, right? At the end of the day, as long as you do better, you will be better.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't try to do better, you're going to be stuck in the same place, right? So I think that's the first step. And honestly, it's just the only way to continue to get better at what you do.
I have to write that down. As long as you do better, you will be better. I like that. One question, and I know
copyrighted trademark.
Yeah, we'll put that as a feature quote. Sure. As long as you do better, you will be better. One question I had is, how did you estimate the construction cost before knowing that you needed all this captive air stuff?
Oh, well, at first it was very much just, I would say, large scale assumptions on my part, and being extremely as conservative as possible, inflating the numbers, knowing what I don't know. Right. So whatever I was comfortable assuming, certain things that I can, just as a matter of construction, I know as a percentage of, total space, it's going to cost this much. That's fine. Right. Yeah. Things like the HVAC, the MEP as a whole, just being unaware, it was talking to the trades and really sitting down with Urban Core and understanding that before we signed a contract. And, for us, it was important to sign a GMP contract, but we wanted to understand in the pre-con of everything it was going to take and make sure we had all our boxes checked, which obviously we didn't. You find that out during construction, but for the most part, it was really understanding before we even signed a contract of what that's going to look like. And the bid process was probably longer than most projects because of that.
You mentioned GMP. And so talking about contract structures, walk us through that decision. What does that mean?
So gross maximum price.
GMP. Good. Yeah. Okay. And so how does that work?
So that's effectively a fixed price contract.
Okay.
So what the contractor has normally done in that instance is they've gone out they've bid it to their subs. They have firm pricing from probably all their subs, if not a very good understanding of where it's going to fall. And we're signing a contract based on that. And there's plenty of little contingencies built in, but at the end of the day, if you don't have a change order, you don't have any unforeseen conditions, it's going to stay at that price. Right.
Wow. Kudos to Urban Core for rocking with that. I mean, especially on this kind of project.
Well, and contractors, and I don't know how Urban Core did it. I'm sure they did, but they'll normally build in a little bit more profit on their end to cover for that, right?
Yeah,
or more administrative costs. They're going to take that risk and they're going to find a way to de-risk it. But that was important to us, being that it was our first project of this kind.
Yeah.
That we didn't want to have just this open-ended, this price could go anywhere.
So you as the owner know you're basically paying maybe a premium price just to get it locked in.
Yeah.
And it's just worth it to just know, like, I know this is good. I could probably get it cheaper at a lower margin along the way, but I don't know how big these change orders are going to be.
Right. And I think maybe it's a costly education, but it's worth it for the education of going through that process, rather than me thinking from the get-go that, you know what, I could do this. I could figure it out as we go, and it's not going to be, I could keep the costs under control and I can manage the trades. Yeah. It's not a big deal. Me thinking that will cost me much more than spending a little bit more upfront, a couple percentage points, just so I can have that peace of mind that it's done right and it's within budget.
Yep.
So early underwriting, you got a building. Would you do just like a sort of, did you look at what a restaurant square foot cost per square foot and maybe add to it?
So,
or just
yeah, we were looking at restaurant underwriting. We were looking at I was downloading plans of different restaurant permits in Richmond that were submitted, trying to understand that process. Because the municipalities are a whole other beast, right?
Yeah.
Oh, great story. Phil helped us out on this. I don't know if you even were involved, Kenny, or remember. We had our RPZ installed, all done, ready to go. City of Richmond comes and says, that's not to code. It's got to be, I forget how many feet away from where it was actually placed. Already installed, everything's done. And we're like, what the hell are we going to do? And so Phil went back, he went back to his notes, he went back to his drawings, and, he went to the city and said, listen, here's the code. I pulled the code out of the city. It gives us 3 options. We chose this option, right? City response is, that's correct. However, if it's not one of the preferred locations, one of the other 2 options, then we have the right to reject it. And we spent a couple of weeks just going back and forth. And Charlie Baker helped out with that as well, where it's just, we're going by the code. Our engineers, you guys think you're drawing this how it's supposed to be, right? And now I'm going to Phil and saying, Phil, what the hell, right? Yeah. And not to say it got contentious at all because it wasn't his fault.
Yeah, Phil, what the hell?
But I'm like, hey, you drew it. Why isn't it right? And Phil's like, well, I drew it per code. And it's like, okay, the city's wrong. And we spent a couple of weeks arguing, but at the end of the day, we got what we needed to. And I think that's where you guys as engineers need to know when to push back and not just take it, right? And not just get questioned for no reason and say, I did it the way I was supposed to, because Phil was the reason that we got them to give us a waiver and exception on that, because he kept over and over and explained to them, not just that it's going to cost an extra $5,000 to move it, but more so that we went by what the city requires.
I'm glad you brought that up. Well, first of all, shout out Phil. Good work on that. Thank you I remember being on one of those phone calls, and it brings up one of the things about engineers that people should take advantage of is that we're really good lawyers, basically. We read building law, literally hours and hours every single day. It's the law. It's the building law. It's the state of Virginia, state of code, Virginia, and same with architects. And any design professional that's licensed is ultimately obliged to understand how those laws work. And so we can be an advocate in that situation. And it just sucks because, like I said, we're not gifted in the art of persuasion or people skills.
Right.
And so if only engineers, more ISEs were in this industry, Carter's Industrial Systems Engineer, which is like basically an ABET accredited business degree from Virginia Tech. Think about, well, tell them about it a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, that's basically it. It's just a big focus on consulting, but it can mix the technical and consulting to kind of have the best of both worlds.
Right.
Yeah, it's a business degree that you can get a professional engineering license with. It's accredited that way. And so those skills come along with that. And if engineers, I think if we're looking into like charisma training, as cheesy as that sounds, just like people skill training for our engineers to help with those soft skills, because we know that code more than anything. We might put light switches over there. We might have some funny duct situations, but man, like we know the code.
Right.
And in that situation, we just have those conversations. If we could increase our skill set in the consulting and soft skills, that just unlocks power for you. We can advocate for you the way an attorney does.
It's something I work on a regular basis. And that's really just doing the best I can at presenting my point, getting my point across, right?
Yeah.
I may know everything about what I need to know. I may be a subject matter expert in something. I may be, extremely knowledgeable in this, but that doesn't mean I can explain it well. Yeah. And that is, like you said, it's unlocking that feature is so key to any kind of success, right? Because if somebody will believe you, and obviously can go the wrong way where you can bullshit anybody, right? But
we know
if you're speaking from a place of knowledge and truth, at the end of the day, that is going to make you more successful than anything else, because you can convince somebody that you know what you're talking about.
I think engineers are reluctant to believe this, but engineering is sales. Just advocating for your idea, just the DOAS. Like a lot of times engineers just don't know how to sell the idea.
Right.
sales skills, sales, marketing, all the stuff that you said is undervalued or easily overlooked. It's like market yourself, make it, just sell what you're good at. And that's gonna be a tough one to overcome. But it's one of the things. Our new we still do the 2-week thing, but we're rebranding into making making engineers accessible for small projects. Like just making it very easy. The instant quote we have now will be out released soon. Some very easy way to do HVAC tonnage estimates for projects, which also will come with a price for engineering if you want to move forward. Just making it that much closer to you, whereas it's otherwise, especially in light commercial, very inaccessible. It's hard to find folks that want it. This project engineers would want. There's a lot of fun engineering, but I don't know, multifam. It's hard to get engineers to just do that because it's not big high-rise buildings. So that will come. What comes along with that is our focus on trying to the consulting art.
Yeah, and it's a matter of finding the right price point for that market. Right. Because to your point, nobody wants to do that because it costs more. It's cheaper to value engineer and hire a couple of trades and, you know, be like, you install the AC here and you install the electrical over there and hopefully there's no problems. You know?
Hopefully nobody burns. We've seen some funny things. Well, appreciate it, man. I'm going to have to wrap up. I think we are over our hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
That was a good one. I appreciate it.
Flew by.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And we started late, but Jonelle Tucker, Chef Suite, singular. I felt like an old person saying Targets.
Best Buys.
So check
Chef Suite, one word, singular. Come by 4711 West Broad Street.
All right. And then we'll put all the folks in here in the show notes so everybody can find out what kind of food they got here. Thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks, man.
And having us over here.
Thank you, guys.